contemporary YA book recommendations. Hi guys, my name is Sharon and today I have 12 contemporary YA book recommendations. Some of these I would consider my favourite young adult books of all time. I don't really read YA books that much anymore. Just, you know, the older I get, the harder it is relate to younger characters sometimes. But I still do, from time to time, read some young adult. I still do love a good first love story. First love is always so pure and sweet, and you know, teenagers are so dramatic. They're like, if it's not this person, then I don't want it. And yeah, sometimes I do like being in a world where a teenager has found their forever person at the ripe old age of like 16. And I've read so many YA books in the past, I just thought I'd do a roundup of some recommendations. First book, The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I mentioned this book in my summer beach reads video, so again, I really don't think this book needs an introduction. It was all over the internet, especially last year when the final season of the TV show came out. But if you haven't heard about it, it's basically about a teenage girl called Isabel/Belly. Every summer, she goes to this summer house in a seaside town every single year with her mum and brother, and this summer house is owned by her mum's best friend who has two sons of her own, Conrad and Jeremiah. So this is where Belly always spends her summers, but this summer is different because she has finally blossomed and quotation marks turned pretty, and then she is caught between the two brothers, Conrad and Jeremiah. This book is part of a series with 3 books in total, and the TV show also has 3 seasons. I definitely did love the first book and the first season the most. You have top tier summer vibes, and also I love a love triangle. I feel like this series, especially the TV show, is young adult but for adults. Next recommendation is also a Jenny Han series, and it's the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series. This is actually the second book because I don't have the first book. The premise of the series basically starts with the main character, Lara Jean, who writes letters to all of her secret crushes, letters which she never intends to send out to them. Then one day they somehow get mailed out to all these boys, and then she has to navigate everything that happens afterwards. The second book is P.S. I Still Love You, and it follows on straight from the first book, where Lara Jean does have a boyfriend and their relationship basically gets tested in this book. I did find this series in general really comforting and cozy, and it had a sense of nostalgia to it. Lara Jean is a really endearing character, and overall this is a really sweet series. Next book is XOXO by Axie Oh, and I won't lie, I only picked this up because I thought the cover was really cute. This one's about a Korean American teenager called Jenny, and she's a cello player. She's really serious about her cello playing. Then she randomly ends up having this really fun and unforgettable night out where she meets this mysterious Korean guy called Jae-woo. But after this night, she never sees him again. And then her and her mum end up moving to Seoul because they need to go look after her grandma. And whilst in Korea, Jenny ends up getting accepted to an elite arts academy, and here she discovers the guy she could not forget, Jae-woo, also goes to the school, and he just so happens to be a member of one of the biggest K-pop boy bands in the world. I actually really don't remember the majority of what happens in this book, but it definitely is a forbidden love trope, and I remember it being a cute book, so read this if you like K-pop. Next book is Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender. This story follows a teenager called Felix, and he's black, transgender and queer, and he's really proud of who he is, but he understandably does fear marginalisation as well. He's never been in love before, but he does want to fall in love, and it just seems so much easier for everyone else to find someone. He also starts receiving anonymous transphobic messages from another student. They are also posting photos of him from before he transitioned as well, so he has to navigate all these different struggles. This is a coming of age story about self-discovery, identity and self-worth. This book is really raw and vulnerable, and it's also eye-opening and layered as well. And this was definitely a 5-star read for me. Next book, Tokyo Ever After by Emiko. In this one, you have a Japanese-American teenage girl, and she's been raised by a single mother. And she's felt like she hasn't really fit in her whole life because she lives in a predominantly white town in California. She ends up finding out that her estranged father is actually the crown prince of Japan, so that makes her a princess. She then gets to travel to Japan and she finally meets him, and she's thrown into this world of palace politics, and she has to deal with things like media scrutiny, the paparazzi, culture shock. There's of course also a romance storyline. I really loved this one. It was so much fun. It's basically the Princess Diaries but make it Japanese, and I also love the Princess Diaries. In fact, this would make such a good film. Why hasn't anyone made it into a film yet? Next book, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Saenz. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I definitely picked this up in the first place because I saw the name Aristotle and I just assumed it was something to do with Greek mythology. And it was only when reading it that I realised that it's actually a young adult. This is set in Texas in the 80s, and it's following 2 Mexican-American teenage boys who are very different from each other. One is very articulate and creative and expressive, and the other is a lot more guarded and he doesn't really know how to express himself in words. I loved the bond they had. And this is a story about love and friendship and identity and sexuality. This was really heartfelt and heartwarming. I read this so many years ago that, again, I don't really remember all the details, but I remember the way it made me feel, and these 2 characters go on an emotional journey. They have such a sweet bond. Also, I definitely recommend the audiobook as well, because Lin-Manuel Miranda is the audiobook narrator, and he did such a good job with this. He really brought the characters to life. Next book, Checkmate by Ali Hazelwood. This is a rivals to lovers romance. You're following Mallory, who I think she's 18, and she was once a young chess prodigy, but then she swore off chess and she stopped playing after some family trauma. And now she works a dead-end job to help support her mum and her siblings. She ends up competing in this charity chess tournament, and she ends up beating the world champion called Nolan. So this is the beginning of her journey back into playing chess, and also the start of her romance. I really didn't expect to love this one as much as I did because I don't play chess. I really don't care for chess, but I found myself really invested in this. This was one of my favourite romance books that I read last year. Mallory is a really relatable character, well, besides the whole chess prodigy thing. But I also really loved the chemistry and the tension between her and Nolan, and there was also really good character development in this. Next book, Everything Everything by Nicola Yoon. This feels like a lifetime ago that I read this one. Back in the day, I was obsessed with The Fault in Our Stars, and that was like my favourite tragic teen love story. And so after that, I was always on the hunt for similar types of books. And I will say this wasn't quite as tragic as The Fault in Our Stars, but it was still a really emotional book. You're following the protagonist, 18-year-old Maddie, and she has this really severe and complex immune condition where basically she's just severely allergic to anything outside. She is stuck in the confines of her home and she can't risk any kind of contact or contamination from the outside world. Her mum is super protective of her. Then she ends up getting new neighbours. There's a new boy called Ollie who moves into the house next door, and this turns her world upside down. This one again was an emotional roller coaster, and I just loved reading these kind of books when I was younger, like specifically books where there was always a sick or ill teenager, and that was like my jam. Next book, Private Label by Kelly Yang. I did read this one quite recently. It was a few months ago, I think, And I will say I definitely would have enjoyed this one more when I was younger. You have two Chinese teenagers living in America, and one is a really popular girl in school, the daughter of a fashion designer, and she's 17 when her mum is diagnosed with cancer, and she basically wants to take on her mum's label, and she has to learn the ropes, all whilst still going into school. And the other is the new boy in town. He's from China and he's just moved to this predominantly white Californian town, and he's an aspiring comedian. He has really strict parents, and when you're Asian, that kind of aspiration could get you disowned. These two characters are very different besides being Chinese, but they are both at different ends of the social hierarchy at school, but they end up connecting and finding refuge in each other. This story is a romance, but it also explores cultural identity and the pressures of growing up in an immigrant family. Next book, Fake Skating by Lynn Painter. This one's more fitting for the wintertime, but we have a high school sports romance with a fake dating trope. You're following these two characters, Danny and Alec, who were once childhood sweethearts, but then Danny had to move away and they were still in contact. But one day Danny just abruptly stopped writing back to Alec. But when her parents end up getting a divorce, Danny actually moves back to their town, which is in Minnesota, I think. But the friendship has already been fractured, and Alec is no longer the boy she once knew when she was younger. He is now the star of the school's hockey team, and hockey is really worshipped in their town. I don't really read sport romance anymore, but I did enjoy this one. I do actually really like a childhood friends to strangers trope. I also enjoyed the romance and the tension between the two main characters, and in general I do like Lynn Painter's romances. Next book, If I See You Again Tomorrow by Robbie Couch. This is a Groundhog Day / time loop story, and you're following the protagonist, who is a teenage boy, and he's basically reliving the same boring Monday in September over and over. And then on day 310 of this same Monday, he's in his maths class, which he's better than me because I would not be going to my maths class, or any class for that matter, if I was living it like 300 and something times in a row. But in this maths class, a new boy shows up, and our main character has never seen him before. This is an anomaly, and he's immediately captivated by him. But of course, the biggest problem is that he is stuck in this time loop, and how can you build a future with someone when you can't even get to tomorrow? I don't know if my mic is picking this up, but my mum is listening to something really loud in her bedroom. I don't actually remember how he ended up getting himself out of the time loop, but I did like the premise of this, and it was a bit different from the usual contemporary YA books I do read. And then the 12th and final book, You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. We're ending with a sad one. I think this one did go viral a while back. This was really heartbreaking and I absolutely loved it. You're following the protagonist, who's in high school, called Julie, and she has a boyfriend called Sam, but he ends up dying in a tragic car accident. She, of course, is devastated and mourning. One day she decides to just ring his mobile because she wants to listen to his voice on his voicemail. But then, to her shock, he ends up answering the phone. There's this miraculous and mysterious connection that is somehow still tethering him to this world, and she is able to call him and speak to him. So then she gets a second chance at saying goodbye to him. But of course, if she's still able to keep calling him and speaking to him, she's basically staying stuck and not moving on. This is a story about grief and letting go. This was really sad. I mean, just the idea alone of a teenage girl calling her boyfriend's phone just to hear his voicemail again after he's passed away is so sad. I did think this book was quite realistic in its portrayal of grief because grieving is really messy. This was such an emotional roller coaster. Read this if you want a good cry. My fringe has been like driving me mad this whole video. So those were my 12 contemporary YA book recommendations. Have you read any of these? Please let me know your favourite YA books. If you liked this video, please like or subscribe. I normally post book recommendations and reading wrap-up videos. I read a lot of thrillers, but I also read a lot of other genres as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.